Hey everyone, Raiden Khan here, and I'm back with another video. Today we'll be looking at Yukong, who is rather one of the more obscure Harmony characters in Honkai Star Rail. I would say that she's actually one of the strongest buffers out there, but due to the way her kit works, she just doesn't get enough recognition, and it's understandable because her kit is so cumbersome that it's just not viable, and I can see why most people would just choose another character rather than go for her. But let's take a deep dive into her kit. I'll be explaining how her kit works, what problems she faces and how those problems can be fixed, and the potential characters that she can work well with. And so let's go ahead and take a look at her traces. So straight off the bat, Yukong is basically a hyper buffer. She buffs attack and she gives a bunch of damage boosts to your hyper carry and allows him or her to deal a ton of damage. Now, what you're looking at here is her skill, and this is her bread and butter buff right here called Emboldening Salvo. So as soon as she uses her skill, she obtains 2 stacks of Roaring Bowstrings. To a maximum of 2 stacks, when Roaring Bowstrings is active, the attack of all allies increases by 80%. And every time an ally's turn, including Yukong's, ends, she loses 1 stack of Roaring Bowstrings. Now, what this means is that her skill, unlike a lot of other buffers, it does not last the entire turn or like multiple turns. Instead, she loses a stack as soon as the next turn is there. For example, if you use Roaring Bowstrings and the next turn is Luocha or any of your non-DPS characters, what that means is that she is already going to lose 1 stack, and by the time you go to your DPS for his or her turn, you may have already consumed your stacks and you may not get any buffs for your DPS at all. So what this means in a nutshell is that speed tuning with Yukong is incredibly important. So for example, the battle starts off and Yukong is the first character. You use Roaring Bowstrings, and the next character that uses that has its turn is a non-DPS characters. Now the problem with that is that you've already lost a stack, and as I've said before, your DPS character is not going to get that buff. What makes it even more cumbersome is her ultimate skill, which is Diving Kestrel. And what it does is that it adds 29.4% crit rate and 70% crit damage at maximum value, which is actually insane. I mean, and I think this is the main reason why we have this caveat with Yukong, where you are so scuffed and kind of forced to speed tune her in order to make sure that after she uses her skill, the very next character is always going to be the DPS characters. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense, especially because her ultimate has a prerequisite, and that is the fact that you need to have stacks of Roaring Bowstrings on Yukong. And if you don't, you basically do no buff at all, because this ultimate becomes a part of her Roaring Bowstrings after you use it. I'm gonna demonstrate it later on, so don't worry, you'll get to know exactly how it works. Now, that said, this is a big problem for Yukong, because unless you speed tune her properly, she's basically useless. And I can see why people would stray away from her and probably use something like Tengyun or maybe even Pela with their damage dealers instead of Yukong. But let's take a look at her Eidolons and see if they help at all. Eidolon number 1. At the start of battle, increases the speed of all allies by 10% for 2 turns. That's fantastic. A very good little quality of life upgrade. Buffs the entire team. Doesn't quite address the problem. Eidolon 2 When an ally's current energy is equal to its energy limit, Yukong regenerates an additional 5 energy. This effect can only be triggered once for each ally. The trigger count is reset after Yukong uses her ultimate. So once again, another very good quality of life upgrade, which I guess helps Yukong charge her ultimate faster. But then again, if you can't get to buff your DPS properly or efficiently, it doesn't really make any sense to have more energy on her. Eidolon 3 just upgrades her skill, as you know. 4th Eidolon, when Roaring Bowstrings is active, Yukong deals 30% more damage to enemies. So another great thing about Yukong's kit is that she's not just a buffer, but also kind of like a sub DPS single target nuke, because her ultimate has a pretty good, I think it has like a 410% multiplier at level 12, so she can do a bit of damage to a single target, besides buffing the hyper carry. Now, taking a look at her 5th Eidolon, that's just a boost to her ultimate level. And then we get to Eidolon 6. Now, this is where everything changes. This is a game changer for Yukong, because when she uses her ultimate, she immediately gains 1 stack of Roaring Bowstrings, which is extremely substantial because, as we saw in the description of her ultimates, you need to have Roaring Bowstrings up in order to apply this insane buff on your hyper carry. And without E6, you would have to always make sure that speed tuning is always in order, and if the turn order gets messed up, then once again her buffs just go out of the window, simply because she loses stacks really quickly. But when you get to E6, that is a real game changer, because then you do not need to worry about the turn order anymore. All you need to do is simply wait for your hyper carry's turn, and then before you set off your carry's skills or ultimate, you simply use Yukong's ultimate, which applies the entirety of the buff provided by Emboldening Salvo, basically, which gives you Roaring Bowstring stacks. So let's go ahead and demonstrate this, I guess, real quick. I'm in Simulated Universe just for this reason. Alright. So here's a very good scenario to demonstrate why E6 makes Yukong, like, it turns Yukong from a, okay, what the hell am I supposed to do on this character? This is very cumbersome, to, wow, this is great, very comfy, easy to use, powerful buffs and whatnot. So the reason why this is such a great example, this particular team, is because I'm using her in tandem with Bronya with Dan Heng Inhibitor Lune. And the reason I say this is because if you use Bronya, Dan Heng Inhibitor Lune, you want Bronya to be as fast as she possibly can. Contrary to how you would use her with, for example, you might want to use her with something like Jing Liu, where you want her to be actually slower than Jing Liu, just so Jing Liu can get another turn. But it doesn't work that way for Dan Heng, because Dan Heng is skill point hungry, and you want him to go last. And keeping that in mind, not having Yukong at E6 just makes her incredibly lackluster to be used with Dan Heng. And on the flip side, if you do have her at E6, she is incredibly powerful with Dan Heng Inhibitor Lune. Now, we don't care about the turn order in this case, but just to demonstrate, if I use her skill, you can see in this corner she got 2 stacks of Roaring Bowstrings. Now it's Bronya's turn, and like I said, if Yukong wasn't at E6, we'd be in big trouble already, because we're going to lose 1 stack of Roaring Bowstrings as soon as I use Bronya's skill, or whatever happens. Like, it doesn't matter, because Bronya's turn ends, and along with it goes away 1 stack of Roaring Bowstrings. So I'm going to use her skill on Dan Heng Inhibitor Lune. Boom. And there goes 1 stack of Roaring Bowstrings. We've already lost 1 stack. And and this was Bronya. If I had used Bronya's basic attack and Locha had gone after her, we would have lost both stacks. Let's just kill this so we have a fresh new mob so that I can demonstrate exactly how her ultimate works with E6. Alright.
Spirit never dies.
So let's suppose we have this.
Lend me your strength.
There we are. We are now here with Dan Heng, and right now we have no buffs on Dan Heng, but since Yukong is E6, all we gotta do is activate her ultimate, and as soon as that is activated, she automatically gains a stack of roaring bowstrings and applies that insane buff on Dan Heng. Additionally, a pro tip for you guys here, if you're running Yukong and Bronya, which ultimate would you use first? Bronya or Yukong? Or does that even matter? Right? This is something that a lot of people don't think about, and I think it's important to think about. Let's take a look at Bronya's ultimate real quick. Increases attack of all allies by 55% and increases the crit damage equivalent to 16% of Bronya's crit damage plus 20% for 2 turns. Now, what you need to understand is that Yukong's ultimate is a generic ultimate. It's not applying her buff to a particular target. It just activates it universally. If roaring bowstring is activated, Yukong, when her ultimate additionally increases all allies' crit rate by 29.4% and crit damage by 70%. Which means that if you want to use Yukong's ultimate in tandem with Bronya's, you should definitely use Yukong's ultimate first. Because Bronya's ultimate is going to incorporate that additional 70% crit damage while calculating the extra percent of crit damage that you will gain from her ultimate. Hope that makes sense. And since it's Dan Heng's turn, you won't really lose the stack. So let's go ahead and use Yukong's ultimate first. Bada bing, bada boom. Nukes that target. As you can see, she already gained 1 stack of roaring bowstrings. And if you press C and look at the stats, roaring bowstring increases attack by 80%, crit rate by 29%. It's not showing 0.4, but it's there. And crit damage by 70%. So we have that massive buff already applied to Dan Heng before he goes. As you can see, his crit rate is already overshooting about 100%, and he's at 307.3% crit damage. Now let's go ahead and use Bronya's ultimate.
To guard and defend, crush them.
Boom! We have Bronya's ultimate on top of Yukong's, and we still have the roaring bowstring stack. Let's go ahead and look at this. 381.4% crit damage. So we have roaring bowstrings, and then we have the additional crit damage buff, the Bellabog March applied. And the reason why this is 74 is, of course, like I just explained, because we use it after Yukong's buffs. So there's intense synergy between them. And now Dan Heng has that insane amount of crit damage. Let's just go nuke this poor guy to oblivion. Easy 330k with no toughness break. And yeah, so there you have it. That was I guess a good demonstration of how Yukong's kit works. And cumbersome before E6, she's not unusable. She's still very cumbersome to use, and I can understand why you wouldn't want to use her with all the speed tuning and all the problems that you have to go through in order to just, make use of her kit. So yeah, but she's a 4-star character, and since I'm a veteran player, not just Honkai Star Rail, but other games by Hoyoverse like Genshin Impact, so I can tell you that if you just continue to play the game, you'll eventually get Eidolons for 4-star characters, since it's much easier to get than 5-star limited characters. And that said, let's go ahead and look at a few characters that she can work well with. Well, to be honest, it's pretty straightforward. She's a hyper buffer, and you can pretty much use her with any hyper carry. I would say she is tailor-made. Well, ironically, before E6, not really that tailor-made for Dan Heng, but with E6, actually tailor-made for Dan Heng. I just explained that earlier. If you go to her trace, you read this trace called Bowmaster. When Yukong is on the field, imaginary damage dealt by all allies increases by 12%. So there's an additional damage boost that would work really well with Dan Heng. And on top of that, if you're using Planetary Rendezvous, after entering battle, if an ally deals the same damage type as the wearer, damage dealt increases by 24%. So that works. That just makes Dan Heng hit even harder. So I would say she's the best 4-star support for Dan Heng. In terms of big numbers, the damage buff she provides is bigger than Ting Yun even. But I'm not saying that she's better than Ting Yun, because Ting Yun's ultimate lasts, I believe, 1 or 2 turns, and she also regens energy, so that's a different topic. But in terms of sheer numbers, in a single nuke, within a single turn, she does a great job. She's incredibly OP. She would also work really well with, honestly, any damage dealing character. She would work well with Jing Yuan. She would work well with Himiko, even Dr. Ratio. Although Dr. Ratio really needs debuffers, so I would prefer something like Silver Wolf or Pela, but you can definitely run at least one hyper buffer with Dr. Ratio, so you could technically use her with him. You could also use her with Xingliu. Any damage dealing character that nukes or like is a hyper carry, Yukong would work really well with that character. So that's about it for Yukong and her kit and her all the caveats, problems. But I would say that if you can get her at C6, or if you do have her at E6, sorry. I play Genshin, so I keep saying C instead of E. But yeah, if you do have her at E6, I would highly recommend you build her, because you may as well. She's an incredibly potent buffer. And I hope this video helped you guys out. If there's anything else you'd like to know, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I recently started doing voiceovers, so I'm still learning how to make better videos and be as efficient as possible. But yeah, I hope you guys like this. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more videos. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.